She didn't scream. That's what everybody got wrong about Brenda Johnson. When Kim Jae-sung walked into Johnson Fruits that Tuesday morning, not alone, never alone, with two men built like walls flanking the door, and his consigliere, Park Sung-il, standing just behind him like a shadow that had learned to wear a suit. Brenda didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood behind her counter and watched. Jae-sung didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He walked, slowly, deliberately, along the first row of display shelves. His hand found the edge of a crate of mangoes. His eyes never left Brenda's face. And then he tipped it. The mangoes hit the floor like a drum beat. He moved to the next shelf. Pineapples this time. Gone. He swept a row of papayas with the back of his hand. They rolled and split across the tile. Bananas. Guavas. A pyramid of oranges Brenda had spent 40 minutes building that morning because her grandmother Deacon May always said a beautiful display was a welcome, and it collapsed like a broken promise. His men didn't flinch. Park Sung-il didn't blink. And Brenda Johnson, third-generation owner of the last standing independent business on Delmore and 9th in Eastwick, Atlanta, watched every piece of her grandmother's legacy hit the floor, one by one, in silence. When Jae-sung was done, he turned to face her fully. "Last offer," he said, $4.5 million, or I come back. And next time, I won't just touch the fruit. Brenda held his gaze for a long, steady moment. Then she reached under the counter, pulled out a broom, and she started to sweep. "Before we go any further, I need to know something. If a man walked into everything you had built, everything your grandmother left you, and destroyed it piece by piece right in front of your face, would you fight back? Or would you do what Brenda did and stay quiet and strategic? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I am reading every single one. And if you would ride for Brenda, if you would stand beside this woman, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this story is about to go places you are not ready for. Let's go back. 72 hours before that broom hit the floor, Kim Jae-sung was not the kind of man who showed up anywhere without a reason. He was 42 years old, Korean-born, Atlanta-raised from the age of 19, and he had spent the last 2 decades building the Hwang Syndicate from a street-level protection operation into a multi-state criminal network that moved money through restaurants, logistics companies, and real estate holding groups with a precision that made federal investigators lose sleep. He was not loud. He was not flashy. He wore dark suits and said very little, because in his world, the men who talked the most were always the ones who had the least power. And right now, his power had a problem. Pinnacle Rise, a billion-dollar mixed-use development in the heart of Eastwick. Hotels, offices, retail floors, a rooftop restaurant, underground parking. The crown jewel of the Hwang Syndicate's pivot to legitimacy. The project that was supposed to prove to his investors, to the Korean Criminal Council watching from Seoul, and to every rival who had ever doubted him, that Kim Jae-sung had successfully crossed from the shadows into the light. One parcel of land was missing. Lot 14. Corner of Delmore and 9th. Home of Johnson Fruits, a third-generation fruit and produce shop. 40 years on the same corner, owned by a woman named Brenda Lane Johnson. 6 offers, 6 refusals. The last one, $4.2 million, had been declined in a handwritten note that said simply, "This shop is not for sale. Thank you for your interest. B. Johnson." Jae-sung had read that note 3 times. Then he told Park Sung-il, "Get the car." Brenda Johnson was 36 years old and had been running Johnson Fruits since she was 29, the year her mother passed and the shop passed to her, the way it had passed from Deacon May to her daughter, and from her daughter to Brenda, like a baton, like a blessing, like a weight you carry, not because it is easy, but because it is yours. She knew the shop the way she knew her own heartbeat. She knew which shelf the afternoon light hit first. She knew which regulars came on Fridays for their weekend fruit and which ones came on Mondays because they were lonely and needed somebody to talk to while they squeezed the mangoes. She knew every crack in the floor, every squeak in the back door hinge, and she knew the story behind every photograph on the wall, especially the one in the center. Deacon May Johnson, circa 1991, standing outside the shop in her church hat and her apron. Shaking hands with a Korean woman Brenda had never been able to identify, both of them smiling. The way people smile when something real has just passed between them. Brenda had always meant to ask her grandmother about that photograph. She never got the chance. So, when Kim Jae-sung walked into Johnson Fruits for the first time, not the day he destroyed it, but 2 days before, alone, no men, just himself, and that quiet, coiled control, Brenda greeted him the way she greeted everyone, warmly, without ceremony. "Mr. Kim," she said, because she had done her research after the third offer arrived. "I know who you are, and I know what you want. Would you like some water while we talk?" He was surprised. He didn't show it, but she saw it. A small tension in the jaw. A blink that came just slightly too late. He said no to the water. He made his pitch. It was smooth. It was well prepared. He spoke about growth and opportunity and what Pinnacle Rise would mean for Eastwick. New jobs, new foot traffic, a rising tide lifting every boat. He made $4.2 million sound like the most generous thing anyone had ever offered another human being. Brenda listened to all of it. Then she said, "My grandmother planted the mango tree out front in 1984. She told me, 'Brenda, roots don't negotiate. They just hold. I am her granddaughter, Mr. Kim. This shop is not for sale.'" Jae-sung stood up, straightened his jacket, walked to the door, and then, just for a moment, he stopped. His eyes found the photograph on the wall, the one with Deacon May and the Korean woman. He stared at it for just a second too long. He didn't ask about it. He left. But what Brenda didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Jae-sung had not left because he accepted her answer. He had left because he was already deciding what came next. That evening, Christopher Webb came by as Brenda was locking up. Christopher was 48, community board member, had lived on Delmore since before Brenda was born. He knew things. He always had. "Brenda," he said, and his voice had that particular weight that meant he had been sitting on this all day. "You know who the Huang Group really is?" She told him she had done some reading. "Reading isn't enough," he said. "Buildings in their way have had fires, Brenda. People in their way have had accidents. 3 shop owners on the South Side signed over their properties and moved away inside of 6 months. And not one of them will tell you exactly why." Brenda locked the door, turned around, looked at Christopher steadily. "Are you telling me to sell?" "I'm telling you to be careful," he said. There's a difference. She thought about that on the drive home. She thought about it lying in bed, the ceiling fan turning slow overhead. She thought about Deacon May, who had never in her life moved for anyone who tried to move her first. And by the time the sun came up, Brenda's answer was exactly what it had always been. But here is where the story takes its first real turn. Because while Brenda was holding her ground on Delmore and 9th, Kim Jae-sung was in a glass-walled conference room across the city, watching his empire start to crack. His investors were restless. 2 of the Korean backers had sent formal notices of concern. His American development partners had called an emergency meeting. Weiss and the Criminal Council in Seoul, the men whose approval had funded the first phase of Pinnacle Rise, had sent a single message through an intermediary. The project must proceed. Delays are unacceptable. In Jae-sung's world, unacceptable was never just a word. It was a warning. And then, in the middle of that meeting, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. The care facility. His stomach dropped. He stepped out, took the call in the corridor with his back to the glass, and whatever was said on that call, nobody in that conference room could hear it, but they saw him. They saw the way his shoulders changed, the way a man who had never once shown weakness in 20 years of running a criminal organization stood in a hallway and pressed his fist against the wall and breathed. His mother, Yoon Hae-rin, Mes had been failing for 8 months. Liver failure, progressive, merciless. The donor search had gone cold. The doctors had begun preparing him for a conversation he was not ready to have. He went back into the meeting, sat down, closed his face like a door. "I will handle lot 14, he said, "by the end of the week." Little did he know, that decision would cost him something no amount of money could ever buy back. Hold on right here, because this is where it gets real. If this story is hitting different, smash that like button right now and leave a comment. Have you ever been pressured to give up something that was yours, a job, a home, a relationship, by someone with more power? Because Brenda's fight is not just her fight. It is every woman who has ever been told her no doesn't count. Subscribe if you haven't already. Heck, we are just getting started. The next morning, Jae-sung came back. This time he brought Park Sung-il, 2 enforcers, and a document, a final legal notice of compulsory acquisition that his lawyers had spent the night preparing, which in plain language meant, sign this, or we bury you in litigation until you have nothing left. Brenda read every word of it, took her time, set it on the counter face down. No, she said. That was when Jae-sung's composure finally broke. Not all at once, not loudly. It broke the way a dam breaks, not with a roar, but with a terrible, quiet cracking. And then everything comes through at once. The investors, the counsel in Seoul, his mother in that bed. 8 months of a donor search going nowhere. 20 years of building an empire on the belief that every obstacle had a price. And this one woman, in this one fruit shop, on this one corner, would not name hers. He walked to the first shelf. Last chance, he said. Brenda said nothing. He tipped the shelf. What happened in the next 4 minutes was something the 2 enforcers would not talk about for years. Not because it was the worst thing they had ever seen their boss do, but because of what happened after. Jae-sung moved through that shop like a controlled demolition. Crates overturned, displays collapsed. The pyramid of oranges she had built that morning, gone. The guavas her regular Mrs. Patterson always came in for on Tuesdays, rolling across the floor. Every beautiful, careful thing Brenda had set up before sunrise was on the ground, and through all of it, Brenda did not move. She stood behind her counter with her hands flat on the wood, and she watched him, not with fear, and not with hatred, with something far more unsettling. Patience. When it was over, Jae-sung stood in the middle of the wreckage, breathing hard. His jacket sleeve was pulled, his knuckles were white, and Brenda reached under the counter, pulled out her broom, and began, slowly, deliberately, to sweep. The sound of that broom on the tile was the loudest thing in the room. Jae-sung stared at her. She did not look up. She just swept. He walked out. Park Sung-il paused in the doorway. He looked back at Brenda, and for the briefest moment, something moved across his face. Something that looked almost like shame. Then he pulled the door closed behind him. Outside on the sidewalk, the mango tree Deacon May planted in 1984 stood completely still. We've all known a woman like Brenda, the one who has been broken before and learned that picking up the pieces, quietly, without applause, without an audience, is its own kind of power. The one who knows that some battles are not won by fighting back. They are won by refusing to fall. Jae-sung drove straight from Johnson Fruits to the care facility on the north side of Atlanta where his mother lived. He did not speak to Park Sung-il on the drive. He did not check his phone. Yoon Hai-rin was sitting up when he came in. She looked smaller than the last time, lighter, the way people look when the body has started the long work of letting go. But her eyes, those sharp, careful eyes she had passed down to him, were warm. They spoke in Korean, low and close, the way they always did in this room. Yeah, as if this was the one place in the world where the language of power and control had no business being. She asked about Pinnacle Rise. He said it was almost done. She smiled the way mothers smile when they know their child is lying, but choose kindness over accuracy. Dr. Aaliyah Cruz knocked and entered. She was direct. Brenda had always liked that about her, Jae-sung thought, and then caught himself, because where had that thought come from? Mr. Kim, Dr. Cruz said, and there was something careful in her voice. There's been a development. We've found a compatible donor, a living donor, compatible on every clinical marker, tissue type, blood group, everything. It is the match we have been waiting for. We would like to begin your mother's evaluation immediately. Jae-sung sat very still. Who is the donor? He asked. Anonymous, doctor, that's Cruz said. They have waived all compensation. They've also made a specific request that the family never be told their identity. They want no contact and no acknowledgement. Jae-sung nodded. He walked back to his mother's room. He sat beside her bed, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he reached over and held her hand. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Jae-sunga, she said softly, whatever is weighing on you, put it down for tonight. He didn't answer, he just held her hand. It was late, past midnight. The ward was quiet. Jae-sung was alone in the family waiting area. Jacket off. The exhaustion he never allowed himself during business hours finally settling into his bones. A nurse moved past at speed, the kind of speed that happens at the end of a long shift when focus slips, and a manila folder slid off the edge of her trolley and landed, open, on the table beside him. He reached to close it. He saw a name, Brenda Elaine Johnson. Living donor, partial liver. Voluntary, preoperative assessment complete. No compensation accepted. Full anonymity requested. Family contact declined. He read it once. He read it again. He set it down. The room was the same room it had been 30 seconds ago. The same chairs. The same fluorescent light with the slight flicker in the corner. The same distant beeping from somewhere down the hall. Everything was exactly the same. And yet, the woman whose fruit shop he had destroyed that morning, the woman who had stood behind her counter and swept glass and produce off her floor without a single word of anger, the woman he had threatened, the woman he had tried to buy, intimidate, and crush. She was in this hospital right now. She had been in this hospital, going through screenings and assessments and the long, uncomfortable process of donating part of her own body, while he was sending legal notices to her door. She had never told anyone. She had asked for nothing. Jae-sung sat in that waiting room chair for a very long time, and somewhere inside the controlled, armored, carefully constructed man he had spent 2 decades building, something broke open. I need you to stop right here. Because what Brenda did, giving part of herself to save the mother of the man who was trying to destroy everything she had, that is not just kindness. That is a level of grace that most people will never understand. And here is the question I want you to sit with. Could you do what Brenda did? Could you show that kind of mercy to someone who was actively trying to break you? Comment below. I genuinely want to know. And if this story is moving you, like this video right now, subscribe, and share it with every woman in your life who needs to hear Brenda's story today. He drove alone, no music, no calls, just the city at 1 a.m., the streetlights and the empty intersections and the long, dark stretches of Atlanta highway where a man could be completely alone with the thing he had just learned about himself. Because that was the truth of it. This was not just about what Brenda had done. It was about what her actions had revealed about him, about the gap, the vast, humiliating, undeniable gap between the kind of person she was and the kind of person he had allowed himself to become. He thought about his mother's hands, how light they felt. He thought about Park Sung-il's face in that doorway. He thought about Brenda's broom on the tile. He pulled over on an empty street, cut the engine, sat in the dark. Just when he thought he had the world figured out, just when the empire was almost clean, almost legitimate, almost everything he had promised himself it would become, a woman with a fruit shop had shown him exactly who he was, and she hadn't even meant to. He came back the next morning, on foot. No car parked outside. No men waiting at the curb. Just Kim Jae-sung in a dark coat, standing on the pavement outside Johnson Fruits at 8:15 in the morning, waiting for the one customer inside to finish and leave. When the shop was empty, he walked in. Brenda looked up from the counter. Her face was unreadable. "I'm not here to negotiate," he said. She waited. "I know what you did," he said. "For my mother. I know it was you." Something moved across Brenda's face, just briefly. Not anger, not satisfaction. Something closer to sorrow, like a woman who had hoped, very much, that this particular conversation would never happen. "That was meant to be private," she said quietly. "I know," he said. I'm sorry for that too. I'm sorry for..." He stopped, started again. "I'm sorry for what I did in here. I'm sorry for all of it. I will pay for every repair, every loss, everything that was damaged. And Pinnacle Rise. I'm having it redesigned. Lot 14 stays. This shop stays. I will build around you. You will not lose this place." Brenda looked at him for a long moment. There was no triumph in her eyes, no victory, just that same deep, quiet steadiness. "I don't want your money, Mr. Kim," she said. "I never wanted your money. I just want you to leave the shop alone. That is all I have ever asked." "Then that is what you will have," he said. He turned to leave, then stopped, his hand on the doorframe. "I have to ask you something," he said. "You knew who I was. You knew what I was capable of. Why would you do that for someone connected to me? Brenda was quiet for a moment. She looked at the photograph on the wall. Deacon May, 1991, the church hat, the Korean woman, the real smile. My grandmother used to say, "You don't do good for people because they deserve it. You do it because you do, because of who you are, not who they are." She paused. "Your mother needed help. I could give it. That's the whole story, Mr. Kim." He walked out into the morning without another word. The mango tree stood in the sun. 6 months is a long time, and no time at all. Pinnacle Rise opened on a Thursday in October. The architecture press wrote about it for weeks. The gleaming towers, the public plaza, the rooftop garden. But the detail that everyone kept coming back to, the detail that became the image used in every article, every feature, every social media post about the building, was the fruit shop at the base of the central courtyard, Johnson Fruits, unchanged. Though a third-generation produce shop sitting in the heart of a billion-dollar development, surrounded by glass and steel, with a mango tree out front, whose roots had cracked slightly through the paving stones and nobody had repaired them because Jae-sung had given specific instructions. Leave the roots. The building's main entrance routed all foot traffic directly past the shop. On opening day, the line for fruit stretched 30 feet into the courtyard. Mrs. Patterson was third in the queue. Brenda worked the counter. She didn't look up at the tower. She didn't need to. Jae-sung visited his mother on a Sunday afternoon, the way he had started doing every Sunday. Hae-rin was recovering slowly, steadily, the way survivors do. Not in a straight line, not without hard days, but forward. They sat in the garden of the care facility. The light was good. She had color in her face again. She took his hand. She said, "There is something I have never told you." He waited. "The winter your father died," she said, "I was alone here. I had no money. I had no family nearby. I collapsed on the street, on a corner in a neighborhood called Eastwick. I don't know how long I was there. A woman found me, a black woman. She brought me inside. She kept me for 2 days, fed me, kept me warm, would not hear of me staying in a shelter. When I was well enough to go home, she called a cab, and she paid for it herself. She would not take a single dollar from me." Jae-sung was very still. "I tried for weeks afterward to find her again," Hae-rin continued, "to repay her. I never could. But I never forgot what she said to me when I left. She said, 'Kindness is not a transaction. It is a seed. You plant it and you walk away. Somewhere down the line, it grows.'" Jae-sung looked at his mother. "What was her name?" he asked, though somewhere deep in his chest he already knew. "May," said Hae-rin. "She said her name was May. She had a little fruit shop on the corner." Silence. The kind of silence that happens when the universe shows you the full shape of a thing you have only ever seen in pieces. "Iyama," Jae-sung said quietly. "I know that shop." Hae-rin looked at him, and in the way that mothers know things, not through information but through love, she simply nodded, as if some part of her had always known it would come back around. Dawn on Delmore and 9th. Johnson Fruits is the first light on the block, the way it has always been. The way Deacon May intended it to be when she flipped the sign to open for the first time 40 years ago and said a quiet prayer over the threshold. Brenda arranges the morning display. Mangoes first, always mangoes first, because her grandmother said they were the warmest fruit, the one that smelled most like home. Her hands move with the ease of someone who has done this 10,000 times and plans to do it 10,000 more. Outside, the mango tree is in full bloom. Its roots push gently, stubbornly, beautifully through the cracked pavement. Behind it, the glass face of Pinnacle Rise catches the early light and throws it back across the street, across the shop, across Brenda's hands as she works. 2 worlds, same roots. Kindness always comes back around, not always quickly, not always loudly, and not always in the way you expected or from the direction you were watching, but it comes. Deacon May knew it, Brenda lived it, and Kim Jae-sung, in the end, had it save his mother's life before he even knew who was doing the saving. Here is what this story leaves us with. There will always be someone who tries to price you out of your own life, who decides that what you have built is worth more to them than it is to you, who uses their power and their money and their muscle to make you feel small, cornered, disposable. But roots don't negotiate. They just hold. And the thing about roots, The thing Brenda Johnson understood in her bones from the time she was old enough to stand behind that counter is that everything the storm tears off the top, the roots are still there, quiet, deep, already growing something new. Now I have one final question for you, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. After everything Kim Jae-sung did, the threats, the offers, the men at the door, the morning he walked in and destroyed everything Brenda had built, after all of that, he came back, he apologized, he changed the building, he kept her shop safe, he carried what he did. Would you forgive him? Tell me in the comments, because this is not a simple question, and I do not want a simple answer. If Brenda's story hit you somewhere real today, like this video, if you know a black woman like Brenda, share this with her. If you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary black people with extraordinary grace, about what it means to hold your ground when the whole world is trying to move you, subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and stay close, because what is coming next is going to make this look like the introduction. Brenda Johnson swept her floor. She saved a life in secret. She stood in the eye of a storm and did not move. And in the end, the storm built around her. That is the kind of woman this channel is for. Don't miss what comes next.